Hello, welcome to AT and the SETT Framework presented by the Capital Area Intermediate Unit AT Consultants. I'm Jerry Schaefer and my partner is Shauna Montgomery. I will be presenting this module today, and it is a Tier 1 module, which means we're going to be looking just briefly at the SETT Framework and how it will apply to all students in your classroom. Okay, so let's get started. What is the SETT framework? What does SETT stand for? SETT stands for Student, Environment, Task, and Tool. It is a framework that was developed by Joy Zabala, and it was designed to help teams collaborate with the AT process. So I like this little graphic here because it's circular. And so what happens is, you look at the student, the environment, the task, the tools, and then you go back and you continue to look at those things. It's not a once and done process. So let's talk a little bit more about the SETT framework and what it is and what it's not. So it is a framework, which means it's just designed to get the team started, to sort of have a place where everyone can get on the same page. It's not an assessment. Many people think because you're filling out a SETT framework that you're somehow assessing or evaluating this student for assistive technology, and that is not the case. This is just a framework. It guides the team discussion and promotes collaboration, so everyone is on the same page, so that we're all talking about the same types of issues. And then it supports the team decision-making process. If you're going through the SETT process, it should help with that decision-making. It is not an end-all be-all to the decision-making process. Like I said in the first slide, it's a circular kind of thing where you're constantly reevaluating and constantly looking at the student, the environment, the tasks, and the tools with the team in order to decide if assistive technology will benefit the student. Okay. All right, so as part of EduPlanet, I have put some resources into the learning path, and this 5 Reasons to Consider SETT is one of those resources. I'm not going to read through this whole thing because you can read it on your own, but it's 5 Reasons to Consider SETT. There is a website called Practical AAC that I took this from that website. I want to give them credit for that. And basically the 5 reasons are so that you have a common focus, so that other team members do not become defensive. If you go through the SETT process, it really kind of breaks down who should be doing what, and if something's appropriate or not appropriate. And in that way, I think it helps team members so they're not feeling like anyone's pointing the finger at them. And it becomes a way of thinking. If it's hard for me, being so many years in assistive technology and doing consultations and speech therapy from classroom to classroom, it's difficult for me to think any other way but through the SETT framework because I've been doing it for so long. But I know when teams first get started, it takes practice, to really stop and say, am I looking at the student? Am I looking at the environment, the task? And then the tool is purposely put last because we want to look at that tool after we've sort of gotten on the same page with the student and the environment and the tasks. Many times, teams will come to me with the tool first in hand and say, how are we going to make this tool work? And that's typically not the way the framework is designed to work, with the tool being first. Now, I know sometimes we cannot control that. Our parents often insist on a particular tool, whether it be an iPad or a communication device, or even a picture system. They choose it, they bring it to school, they say, here's what we want you to, work on, and then, we're kind of stuck with that tool. But it still can help, even if that's the case, it still can help us kind of go back as a team, look at the student and the environment and the task, and see how that tool might be able to work. But the SETT framework is not designed to put the tool first. It's designed to have the tool as a last option. Okay, so it's a way of thinking, and it also does help level the playing field in terms of, the team approach. Everyone can have a say in this SETT framework. Everyone can contribute to the SETT framework, and I think that really helps all team members feel like a valued part of the process and the decision. Even the parents can be, involved. I highly encourage teams to get their parents involved with the SETT framework so that they understand how the team is thinking and the process by which we're choosing tools. And then this is a tried and true approach with established resources. The SETT process was developed in the early 90s, like I said, by Joy Zabala, and now has become something that is used all over the world. This SETT process has become sort of an assistive technology given. It's tried and true and really does work and is effective. And so it's something that I think it's important for all of our teams in the IU area to understand and use. Okay, so let's start with the student. And I like this little graphic is provided to you through EduPlanet in our resources area. And I like this little graphic of a person, because it really kind of starts you out thinking about the idea that this is a person. Our students are people first, and there are things about their physical strengths and weaknesses that or cognitive strengths and weaknesses that we need to consider. And this is a good way to just sort of to think about that. So we have, what is their cognition, their receptive and expressive language, their visual skills and what modifications they might need, their current communication skills. How are they hearing? Their fine motor skills, their gross motor skills, their the access that they need for different things, whether it's, a head pointer or a mouse or even a pencil grip. How are they accessing certain activities and academic materials? And then scanning options. If they have a switch, are they, do they need a switch to access maybe their communication device or their computer software program? And how are they scanning? Are they able to go through many options and choose the appropriate one, or maybe they just have two options, that kind of thing. So I think that this is a nice way for you to consider the student and where their skill levels are. What are they doing? You will see, I'm going to show you what we use at the Capillary Intermediate Unit as our SETT form. And it's basically, I like to bullet point. I don't necessarily need to write long paragraphs about, the SETT framework. But some people do. Some people like to, start with the student and then just write a long paragraph about all of the students' skills, strengths, weaknesses, that kind of thing. But I'll show you later. I just do sort of a bullet point and kind of, it's very much like this person, the person. Okay, so let's go on to environment. Okay, so here's a classroom environment. We need to look very closely at what the environment is like for the student. Obviously, this is a younger classroom environment. You know, as the student ages, the environment obviously changes. We need to look at that environment and say, what are the barriers in the environment? What are the things that are actually helping with inclusion? So the way things might be arranged in the classroom could be an issue. It could be an issue about where the student has to get to are they physically able to get to the tools and materials that they need? Is the environment one where you're going to come in and sit down and work quietly? Or is the environment one where you're asked to work in groups, where the student needs to be able to move around the classroom? So that environment piece, it's really important to look at, you know, what is that environment for the student? You'll see when we go over the sheet that the IU uses, I like to talk about recess. You know, what does recess look like for younger kids? I like to talk about the lunchroom, especially for older kids, because that's a really important environment for them, a social environment. And I like to talk about if the parent has any issues in the home environment, or if the child is of transition age, what is the work environment going to look like? So the environment is really important to, you know, kind of break down and discuss exactly, you know, what it entails for that student, and maybe look at what some of the barriers might be. All right, tasks. So there are a lot of tasks that we're asking students to complete through the course of the school day. You know, we're asking them to communicate, to listen, to speak, to write, reading, typing, organizing. They have to transition, you know, they have to move around and pay attention and follow directions. And the social skill list goes on and on, you know, being able to socially interact with each other, socially interact with adults, knowing what the social rules are. So there's many, many tasks that students are being asked to do. And it's very, very helpful in the SETT framework if you identify those tasks that the student can do very well, and then identify the tasks that the students have difficulty with. Because usually the ones that they have difficulty with are the reasons why we're there as AT consultants. So if they're having difficulty communicating, or they're having difficulty organizing themselves, or if they have difficulty just moving around the classroom, those are the tasks that we would focus on, you know, and try to resolve any issues or barriers that might be presented. So thinking about the tasks that you're asking your student every day to do is a really important part of that SETT framework. And then we get to the tools. Now, again, you'll see when I show you the SETT framework that we use at the IU, I have the tools separated into two categories. The first category is the tools you're already using, okay? So if the task is organizing, I want to know you're identifying a task that the student has to do and is having difficulty. So let's say it's organizing. I want to know what tools have you used or do you have available in your classroom to help that student with organizing? Do you have visual schedules? Do you maybe have an iPad app that reminds the student what they need to do next? Or do you have some kind of visual with steps? Here are the steps to getting ready to go home. Here are the steps to getting ready for your reading class. What are you using? What tools do you use right now to help that student with that organizing task? Those tools can be very, very simple. They could be a simple sticky note, sticky notes that the student is using. It could be that you're providing pencil grips for the students to access their writing. Whatever tools you're using. And I really encourage teams to list as many things as possible. Give yourself credit for those things that you are doing. I see lots of great things happening in our classrooms, and teachers aren't giving themselves credit for it. And they think, oh, you mean that's assistive technology? And I say, yeah, if it's a tool that you're providing to all of your students in your classroom, then you should list it. You should put that down as something that you're using to help students. Many teachers provide headphones for all students so that they could listen in a way that maybe blocks out noise in the classroom, or slant boards. Many students need a slant board in order to write appropriately. Tape recorders, whatever it is that you feel you use as a tool in your classroom to help students complete a task. Give yourself credit, write as many things as you can down. Then there's a second column that I use, which is tools you might want to try. So after you've given yourself credit for all the things that you provide in your classroom as tools for these different tasks, now we want to start brainstorming and say, okay, so you've provided all of these things, but the student is still struggling with organization. So maybe here are some things that you haven't provided that we might be able to try and see if they work. So that's where I think the team effort and the problem solving and the trialing of different tools comes in, is that category of, okay, we've provided all of these things to all students. That's our tier 1 process. And now we need to, think more sort of out of the box or more specifically about this particular student's needs, which goes up into your tier 2 and your tier 3 thinking. So for now, that SETT process is a way for you to look at the students in your class, the environment of your classroom, the tasks you're asking those students to do, and the tools that you provide each student to do, each student with in order to complete those. Okay, so here's the SETT Framework example that I said we use at the Capillary Intermediate Unit. It can look any way you want. It does not have to look like this. Like I said, it could be in a report form. You could, you can put this, any way you really want. I've put it in this sort of form-like manner that is basically just bulleted so that everything's on one page. So you can see here's where I'm going to talk about the student. Immediately when I meet a student, I need to know how old are they, what diagnoses do they have? I mean, do they have CP? Do they have autism? Have they been diagnosed with autism? Have they been diagnosed with attention deficit? Those kinds of diagnoses are important. So that's where I would ask the team to provide information about that. What kind of therapies are they receiving? Do they have OT and PT and speech therapy? Oh, sorry, I got to go backwards on this one. Sorry. There we go. What kind of therapies are they receiving? That's really important to know who those team members are. Then also, what is their vision like? What is their hearing like? And then we have their levels, their reading level, their writing, math, expressive, and receptive. And I really want to say something about these levels because I go to a lot of teams and we sit down with the SETT process and I start asking the teacher, what's the child's reading level? And I will hear teachers say they don't have a reading level. Well, that's not true. There is some way for you to be able to describe a child, no matter what phase or level they are at. Even a tiny child has a reading level in the fact that maybe they can't read themselves, but maybe there's some pre-reading skills that they have developed. Can a child sit next to you, open a book, look at the pictures, know that you're going to be telling a story, know how to turn pages, things like that. All those pre-reading things that students need to be able to do in order to get started with reading. So to say that there's no reading level is probably not the best example of completing this, when you're completing this form. Like I said, even if you just write in pre-reading, and then maybe down here you might want to list some of the things that they can do in that pre-reading level. Same with writing, even if you're just at that point where you're getting a child to put a writing tool in their hand, or if a child needs to use a computer, even if they are just randomly pressing buttons, that's a level. That's something we can build on, and hopefully your student's doing something that looks like writing. Same with math and the expressive and receptive language. Your speech therapist is usually the one who knows the most about how to get an expressive and receptive language score from a student. Some of our students, it's very, very difficult for us to give standardized tests to. But if you could at least try to go through receptively and expressively, maybe there's a word list, or like the MacArthur's developmental list, vocabulary list, where you're just starting out. Do they know what, do they know these kinds of toys? Do they know these colors? Do they know these animals? Can they receptively point to them? Can they expressively tell you what they are? Just so that you can get an idea of where they are in their language. Are they at a preschool level, or are they at a 12 or 13-year-old level? We need to know that. All that information is really important when we're looking at the student. Okay, so then we're going to the environment. Here's what I like to look for. What placement are they in? So what environment are they in? Are they included in regular ed? Are they in an MDS classroom? Are they in an autistic support classroom? What is their placement? Their grade? What specials do they have? Again, I talked earlier about lunch and recess and what the home and the work environment might look like. And then I also put down best strategies in an environment. So many times the teacher can tell me that there are certain strategies that they've learned for the environment that the student really excels with or benefits from. So things like proper lighting, things like a quiet area. Some students really have difficulty with the fluorescent lights. And I see a lot of classrooms where the teachers will shut off those fluorescent lights and put lamps in the room so that child's not annoyed or irritated by that. So those are the kinds of strategies I would look for an environment if you know things that work. And then the tasks, obviously, I just bullet point, communication. What tools are we using? organization, what tools are we using, that type of thing. I don't put every task here, but I usually put the tasks the student's having difficulty with, and then what you're using in your classroom to help with those tasks. The things that you know, pretty much, this is tier 1, so it's pretty much what you provide to all students: slant boards, special paper, special pencils, maybe Big Mac switches, you know, those kinds of tools. And then the Explorer would be the things that we're going to talk about as a team. What could we possibly explore? And I like to use this as brainstorming. So I like to bullet point as many things that we can brainstorm as we can, and then go back and say to the teacher, okay, why don't you pick one that you feel will be the easiest for you to try, or maybe two that you think will be really good to try. But I like to brainstorm in this column. So that's the SETT framework that we use at the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. And, you know, it usually goes pretty quickly as we go through. You know, as you learn how to do it, you can go through it pretty quickly. So then there's a team action plan that we use. This I usually copy on the back of the SETT framework. So the front side is the SETT framework, and on the back is the team action plan. And basically, once you've identified tools you want to try, you have to look at what needs to be done. So, you know, who's going to acquire the tool? Does anybody need to be trained on how to use the tool? What prompt hierarchies are you going to be using? What data collection tools? All of that. So all those things need to be done, and somebody needs to do them. And I like to identify which team member will do it. So, you know, is the teacher the one who's going to get the data collection sheet, or maybe the speech therapist is going to do that? Who's going to acquire the tool? Who's going to make sure everybody's trained? That kind of thing. And by when? I like to set up a date and say, okay, you know, if it's going to be, I don't know, February 1st that we want to make sure we have the tool in the classroom and ready to go, then we're going to put that there so that we can go back and say, okay, it's February 1st now. Did we get this stuff done? And be realistic. Give yourself the time that you need. Everything doesn't have to be done, you know, immediately overnight. So try to be realistic about that. And then I just put who was present, their position, whoever was present at the meeting. And then I like to always have a classroom, and this is for whatever reason, sorry about that. I'm gonna go back. A follow-up meeting date. So I'm going to say, all right, you guys have decided you're going to do this in the month of February. So I'm going to come back maybe at the end of February, the beginning of March, and let's regroup as a team and see what we've accomplished and what decisions can be made, or maybe ideas that need to be changed. So that's the action plan form that I use. Like I said, I usually copy it on the back of the SETT so that everybody can get a copy of the SETT form and the action plan. It could be put in the student's folder for a later date, and everyone's on the same page about what we're doing. Okay. All right, so that is the SETT process. I know I went through that quickly, but it is tier 1. So keep in mind that what you're doing at tier 1 is you're looking at all of your students. And right now, you do not need to know how to complete a SETT form for every individual student, but I want you to be thinking, like, let's first think about all of your students, what their needs are, where they are, in terms of their skill level. Let's look at your environment, what's going on in your environment that you provide for all students, or that maybe you could change to help for all of your students. What are the tasks you're asking all students to, complete every day? What are the things in your everyday schedule that students are being expected to accomplish? And what tools do you have already in your classroom that could be provided to all students. I want to say something very quick about that. Many of our students do not want to look different from their peers. And so if you're providing tools on a tier 1 level to all students, then they don't feel like they're being singled out. So for example, specialized paper. You might want to provide specialized paper in a bin that students, you might want to have, a place where students can go and they can try whatever paper they want and try all the different papers. And if every student in your classroom is trying different papers, then it doesn't single anyone out. Same with pencil grips or slant boards or headphones. If all students have these things available to them, then it doesn't make any one student feel like they're different. So keep that in mind too when you're thinking about the SETT process and that tier 1 evaluation of your classroom. Okay, so thank you again for your attention today. I want to remind everybody to please complete the reflection questions in the EduPlanet learning path, and I've put a bunch of resources there for you to look at as well, like the SETT framework and all of that is there for you so that you can make copies or download or whatever you want to do. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next module.